Recently, I have seen a Vinesauce stream that nobody else has seemed to seen before. It was completely removed, to be discarded and forgotten and lost from time and all of existence in human memory. Or perhaps it came from the future. You see, it was a Sunday stream, and it wasn't a stream like any other. It started out as normal. Finney played a song that some teenager recorded in their garage in 1993, and then after it was over, he started talking into the mic, and he was like, "Chat, welcome to Sunday Stream. But this is no ordinary Sunday Stream. This is Sunday Stream 6669. Truly an outstanding feat to achieve for this." And Finney announced that for this anniversary, he would like to stream a special game. A title screen appeared on the screen, and he said, "Chat, for this anniversary, we're going to be playing Super Duper Pooper Scooper Super Binyards Land Ultra Omega 3-4. And Finney started playing the game, and it was the usual Sunday stream schlock. However, it proved to be very difficult, and Finney kept on dying. He was getting more and more mad as this happened. At first, he was just like, don't, why? And, "Ooh, diet stupid baby game," and mocking Chad, who was mocking him back. Around the 5th level, Vinny had died approximately 1,337 times. Once he died again, by this point, he had completely snapped. He was making completely inhumane babbles and noises that were absolutely baffling. He was like, Willy Wonka is a giant fucking ass." After Finney had blown up and thrown a fit, the screen went black, as if he was having fine Ryzen issues. Some of chat left, but most stayed, expecting him to come back soon. Which he did. After around 5 minutes and 23.2 seconds, Finney began speaking again. He was like, "Chat, hi, sorry about that. As you can probably guess, I had some issues there, but I'm back now." And to the surprise of many, the face cam came on, and we saw a glimpse of Finney's house. He then adjusted and moved the camera so that we could see his face instead. Finney looked closely at the camera, and he had this absolutely uncanny and off face and smile to him. It was super wide and looked abnormal, as if it was some sort of AI-generated version of him almost. And he was like, "Chat, we can't just let this Sunday stream go to waste. It's a special occasion, so I'm going to do something for it." He then started to adjust the camera again, and it zoomed out to reveal, to an even bigger shock, that Nords was sitting next to him. However, Nords was tied to the chair he was sitting on, and he was looking around nervously. He was like, "Chat, we're going to have some fun tonight." And Nords went like, "Oh, help me." And then Finney pointed at Nords and yelled, "Hey, you shut your mouth." He then slapped Nords across the face super hard. I gasped and covered my mouth when I saw this first happen. He then took out some nasty old rusty looking knife that was meant for throwing at ghosts, and he lit it on fire, and he started poking at Nords with it and touching him with it and hitting him with it. Nords began to cry as this happened, and I was so scared and confused and upset for him and sad. Nords then continued to cry as Finney loudly strummed his guitar over it. After a bit, Finney stopped playing, and he looked at Nords with a super annoyed and pissed off face, and he was like, "Hey, I told you again," while pointing at him, "to shut your mouth." Finney then took a piece of tape and put it over Nord's mouth, who still continued to cry over this. I felt so sad for him, I wanted to cry. Finney then looked over at camera, and he was like, "Chat, don't think you're not going to be included in this as well." The screen then went black for a slight pitch second, and then Vinny then suddenly appeared super close up to it with an even bigger, wider, more uncanny, mischievous, scary grin as last time, and his eyes were more red and black, and hyper-realistic blood was pouring out in between his teeth and leaking out of his eyes, and it was the most scary thing I have ever seen in my life. The screen became more and more staticky as this was happening, to the point where it just completely overflown with it. The static remained like this for around 3.5 days, and most of chat still seemed gone, but wanted to stick around to see what would happen. Somehow, after this time, the static had cleared away, and it showed a different scene. It was a big round table and unknown location, and sitting there were various streamers that Finney knew and were friends with. There was Joel, Mike, Rev, Jerma, simpleflips, Ross, Hackerling, and a whole new streamer I've never seen before named Gao Saru. However, these weren't the ordinary streamers. They were weird, distorted, corrupted, twisted, evil, dark versions of them. Joel was bald. Rev was in a straitjacket and had crazy eyes and knives sticking out of his mouth as teeth. Mike had sunglasses on and a tiny little Dave cap on his shoulder. Jerma had big clown hair and a giant nose and was wearing green pants. Simpleflips was completely different, for his hair was not curly, but he was wearing it straight long down. Ross was completely monstrous and like a Muppet, had this big, slouching, sad, depressing frown on his face, and it was all wrinkly and as if his skin was just falling completely off his face as he was existing. Hackerling was normal. However, she kept on giggling at everything and pointing at everyone as they did anything. Gao Saru was wearing a dark green bloodstained gi and had gray gloves and long hair. They all sat there together and proceeded to cry and weep and mourn over Nords for 8 days and 23 minutes straight. The screen was super blurry and it was hard to make out anything. After this, however, they then began to talk and discuss how to free Nords and stop Finney and snap their old friend out of it. They then decided that the best course of action would be to go to New York and have Mike and Joel approach Finney, being the two seemingly closest to him, as well as the ones who are the most familiar with New York, while the others stayed behind and avoided to get hurt, made sure that everything went along smoothly as surprise backup. They then took an airplane and flown over from Sweden to New York City at Staten Island, and as they flown over the ocean, you could hear the plane announcer go like, "This is going to Vinesauce 69er, 69er, overspeed, overspeed, overspeed," and the plane began to beep before eventually making a crash landing, and as this happened, the streamers all start to scream and flail their big wiggly arms up over their heads, but they didn't look normal too, as the animation style had suddenly changed to be a mixture of puppetry and claymation. The plane then crashed in Staten Island. However, they all got out safely, and the streamers grouped up and they hid behind a fence near Finney's house as Joel and Mike went off to approach Finney. The two stood in front of his front door, and Mike started banging on the door, and he was like, "Hey, Finney, open up, you, this is crazy, man, get out of here, you boobalash, and I'm walking here," and Joel was like, "Oh, yes, he should be coming out here any moment. Skyrim belongs to the Nords." They then just ended up causing the door to fall over as if it was all weak and decayed and broken, and they approached and went in Finney's entranceway, and his house was dark and dank and disgusting, and you could hear water dripping somewhere, and there was discarded eaten pizza crust all over the floor, and pizza boxes, and garlic, and spiders and centipedes were crawling around all over the place. They quietly snooped around and searched to see if they could find Nords or Finney or anything. And after snooping around for a bit, you could hear Finney go like, that door. And they looked over and saw this absolutely horrifying version of Finney, who was parts human, but also gigantic, and parts centipede and spider, and he had big, hyper-realistic, bloody red black eyes, and a big giant grin on his face, and he then began to scream and chase after them in a cartoony fashion, and Mike screamed and was like, and ran off the house and down the street as Finney pursued him, and they were going so fast I could barely tell what was happening. Joel, worrying about Mike a bit, but believing in him, took this opportunity alone to go find Nords, and he managed to find an exhausted, tuckered out Nords who was moaning and still tied to the chair and covered in whipped cream, and Joel went over to comfort and rescue the distressed alien. However, it was when Joel got super close to Nords that he realized that Nords was actually indeed an alien, and Joel's eyes widened and he broke into a cold sweat. And he went like, oh shit, and ran off the house even faster than Mike and Finney did, and the other streamers just looked and shook their heads and sighed as Joel retreated seemingly to the nearest IKEA as a safe house and the nearest Swedish embassy. Finney and Mike then returned, still being chased, and Mike ran down the street back in front of Finney's house. However, Finney then caught up to Mike, and Mike screamed and went like, "Hey, what you doing?" And Finney put Mike on this big gray table and strapped him to it, and he then started to spin it and dump pizza toppings on Mike, and Finney went like, "Speed!" for 5 whole minutes until Mike had enough and was completely cooked and baked into a pizza. And then, guess what he did? Vinny ate him entirely whole. And he burped, and he was like, "Chat, I'm sorry, I hate burping on stream, it is disgusting to do." The other streamers then realized that they had to do something, but they were all scared, and Simpleflips tried distracting the giant Finney a bit and ran around and backwards long jumped, and he's like, "Dude, I am schmoovin', you idiot," and Germa just kind of cried and got scared, and we're like, "Oh!" And Ross threw a brick at Finney. Everything seemed hopeless until, out of nowhere, some figure fell from the sky as if it had jumped or flown over, and nobody knew who it was at first, but then they started to hear a familiar voice, and it was, oh yes, what happened? And I thought I took the bus to go back home, but they took the wrong turn, and now I'm stuck here, and it was Bulk Bogan, and Finney stared at Bulk Bogan and readied his jaws and drooled a bit, and Bulk Bogan looked at him, and he was like, oh yes, I have heard of the funny Vinesauce Vinny New York man, and I bet I am stronger than he is, and Finney then starts to spit out dreams at Bogan, but Bogan took out a gun and effortlessly dismissed all of them, and he then proceeded to attack Finney and wrestle with him and tackle Finney to the ground, who was like, what, and squirming his giant centipede legs around, and he starts to scream really loudly and leak out more hyper-realistic blood until Bulk Bogan eventually twisted his head and defeated him. Bulk then went into the house and found Nortz and freed him from the chair, and he held Nortz in a cradle-like position. He was like, there, sweet precious Elione, it is all over now, you are safe, and Bulk Bogan then put Nortz up to his chest and began to breastfeed and nurture him right then and there. The other streamers then got their normal appearances back and started to hop around and cheer, except for Rev, who was still in a straitjacket and had knives to chase people around with. And then the stream ended, and that was it for the Sunday stream. I wondered what had happened if any of chat had remembered this. I saw this on the Full Sauce channel as a FOD for only 1 second at 5 a.m., but then after that, it was gone, and I've never heard anybody else talk about this before, and Vinny has been back and seemed normal. Was this a forgotten piece of us history that they wanted to remove, or was it from the future? None may ever know. I just want to forget this for a bit and move on and assume it was just some anomaly and supernatural thing that my mind made up. However, it was then where I walked around, and in my house, I noticed that there was a house centipede